All right, we're back with the Bob Gjika interview part 4, and we're going to talk about speaker cabs. I hear him have super long conversations with people about cabs, and I hear him say the same thing over and over. So I think that would be good to clear up any misconceptions and get Bob's take on this in this Tone Tech Talk. We're going to talk about speakers. He'll talk about the 10 in with other cabs. I made a little list here. What is the difference between ceramic speakers and Alnico speakers? Open back versus closed back. Is it good to mix speaker types in one speaker cabinet? And breaking in, how long does it really take to break in a speaker? So we'll start with the 10 in with other cabs. Bob, let's hear what you have to say. When somebody say they were thinking about maybe getting a 10 in head, and they've heard you talk about how great your speaker is with the cab, and the head, right, and how it's tuned that way.
People chasing tone, like,
right.
That's why you'd be looking at this stuff anyway, because everybody I know, I'm in that group of people that are always chasing tone, and people I've known for decades are always asking me about speakers and this, that, and the other thing. Why? Because I know everything? No, it's because they want my opinion. So this is just my opinion.
But they like your tone.
So if you feel a different way than anything I say here, then
this is opinion
all
piece.
The power to you. This is just my opinion. So, if somebody doesn't have convictions on their opinions, then they're not really worth it.
Well, maybe, at least they can hear what you have to say about it.
Just remember that in this, don't flame me if you say, well,
so 10 in with the
I've
other cabs. You've got a lot of other cabs.
Right.
And you like it with those too.
Good with any good speaker cabinet, okay? And that's your choice, whether it's open back, closed back. We're going to get into the differences of all those cabs anyway, relating to any amp, let alone my amp, okay? My cabs that I put together specifically for these amps make my old amps sound better too. They'll make a train wreck sound better than with a vintage speaker. Okay, I mean, I've sold them to people that own train wrecks and tell me that. So,
So in your opinion, this is just a good sounding.
I'm telling you, my
cab
is better because, yeah, I tune it and test it with the latest amp I'm building, right? But then if I go put it on another amp, I go, wow, it sounds great there too. Maybe it doesn't get as much a boost in tone quality from a lesser amp, but if you want to buy a head and buy a cab later, tons of people do that. They buy and they didn't know they were even missing anything, because when they get the cab, they call me and go, wow, it's even better with this cab, So
what I'm hearing is that it sounds like tone is cumulative. If you've got a great speaker cab, it helps. If you have a great amp, it helps. If you have a great guitar, it helps.
Chords, everything.
But
everything.
mainly if you play well.
And that's part of building a great amp or anything, or even a great speaker cabinet. I mean, I have people call me and tell me they bought a cab from like a big high-end boutique company, and the speakers were wired out of phase. That means someone didn't even listen to that cab. I mean, when I put a cab together, it's like I do with my amps. I mean, I
I can attest that Bob thoroughly tests every product before it goes out.
I'm moving these things around all day long. So it's little details. When someone goes, "What did you do? This sounds," it's just little details. Okay, so that'll bring us into the next philosophy of speakers.
Difference between ceramic speakers and Alnico speakers.
I hear people. I watch some of those things where popular guys are on there that build amps, and people write in or call in or whatever they do, or type in from the computer.
Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. The chat.
Guys ask, like, what's it, and the guy can never answer the question. It's just like, well, So I'm gonna try to be
the question of the difference between ceramic
and ceramic. I'm gonna try to answer the question as most of the guys
thoroughly.
already know that from just listening to them. Okay. But for beginners, maybe you haven't done that, okay? So a ceramic speaker is generally going to be more brawny sounding, okay? An Alnico speaker is going to be a lot smoother and silkier sounding, okay? But there's a catch-22 here with the two. So you would think, well, I like brawn, but silky smooth. That's got to beat that, right? But, in a lot of ways, an Alnico speaker is not the best speaker, because the biggest difference between Alnico and ceramic generally needs a closed back cabinet. Alnico generally performs the best in an open back cabinet. Okay, and it comes from the root of the design. Alnicos are the oldest speakers after field coils, and they had Alnico too. But so Alnico cabinets were open back then. They had open backs. Okay, and then when they started to came up with a ceramic magnet, a Stromer magnet, they were more refined and closed back. Okay, now if you put a ceramic speaker in a closed back cabinet, it's going to become very detailed and have a lot of brawn. If you put,
that's what you're doing.
That's the way my cabinets are designed. Okay, I love Alnico speakers. My problem with them is I'm not crazy about the general sound and feel of an open back cabinet. I mean, they're loud, they're shouty loud. The bass is usually very boomy. It's not part of the whole note. It becomes an isolated boom kind of sound. And then cabinet design is very important. And always remember, when you're dealing with open back, I'm not talking about a combo. A combo isn't a speaker cabinet. To me, it's junk. It's taking a box and shoving a head in it and shoving a speaker in it.
But
yeah. I'm just not crazy about it. It's not.
Well, what about your tweed?
It's not my what I really think is a great way to mount a speaker in something. Okay, so if you're putting an Alnico in a cabinet and it's going to be an open back cabinet, you got to be very careful, because whatever that spacing is that creates the bass is like a boomy bass slapping off of an open space, that won't happen in a closed back. But when you put an Alnico in a closed back, it doesn't quite work properly. Okay, where a ceramic does. So that's the
Plus,
difference.
you don't get as many bugs inside.
That's the difference. Ceramic is a much more powerful magnet. Okay, so it's going to be a brawnier sounding speaker. It will become much more detailed in a closed back, where an Alnico won't. Okay, and an Alnico sort of needs the open back to sort of throw the sound out. Okay, because it's not as strong a magnet. But an Alnico sounds very smooth and silky. But if you build an amp that has all that in it already, you might want to think about going ceramic. But if your amp is really harsh, see, that's the other thing you got to remember about speakers. Speakers match amps. Okay,
so the tone's cumulative.
Yeah, if you're playing a real ratty sounding tweed amp, and you put a ceramic speaker in it, you're asking for trouble. But an Alnico speaker will warm that amp up. Now I don't use speakers that way. I don't use speakers to correct the bad design. But in industry, that's been done over and over again. Yeah, it shaves off the upper high end and smooths the mid range out nicely. Okay, so if you need a speaker like that, you go Alnico. Okay, so when I'm explaining the difference of the two speakers, I'm doing it in such a way where I'm telling you ways to use that difference.
So what does an Alnico do with your amp?
I've got EVs. I got a big EV in that Alnico, beautiful originals, like the sea green thing in that, and that's open back, and it's beautiful sounding. But my preference in sound that works for me.
I noticed by its placement you don't use it much.
No, I don't use it much at all. When somebody who comes over here that uses those speakers, I'll plug that in for them. But I do like it. It's a certain sound. I have an Altec 417 in a box that I need to put in a cab. But I generally never really aren't crazy about them. But I like to have them here for other people to use. In these cabs, I have the same speakers Hendrix and Jimmy Page and those guys use. They're the 60s 30 watt. I've got lead cones in this one. No, the bass cones are in this one, and the lead cones are in this one. And they're extremely different sounding speakers. I've got boxes full of Jensens that have been in and out of cabinets here. I just don't have room for all these cabinets, but I do hoard old speakers. I have a lot of speakers.
I haven't seen all those boxes. There's a lot of them. That's for sure.
And I have 20 watt original 20 watt Celestians. I have 25 watts. I have all that stuff, right? So you're getting an opinion from a guy that's been around a long time, building amps, playing amps, repairing amps, knowing the difference of speakers in relation to really what's different about them, and how to use them with different amps. So in my case, when I build an amp, I'm not I'm building just a great sounding amp, what I think is a great sounding amp. And then the reason why the speakers that are in my cabinets wound up in there is because when I break those speakers in and get them just right, I think they're the best sounding speaker. And when people get my cabinets, they also, like I said, have other amps. They tell me that their other amps sound better through that cabinet than what they thought was a great cabinet. So, and if it sounds this much better and you don't
you're
know
a tone
about
fiend,
it,
yeah.
that's one thing. But if it sounds this much better and you felt it and heard it, you're going to want it. That's how we are. That's what we do. Why we chase tone.
So what about if you mix as two different kinds of speakers? So if you wanted both features, why not just stick two different speakers into one speaker cabinet?
Right. That was something back in the old days that was never done. Okay, everyone was smart enough to know not to do that because just electronically it doesn't work. Oh. That's a forum anomaly. People on the forums, well, I mixed to this and to this. You guys ought to try this, and it's like, and I just see all this stuff. And anytime I've ever, and I keep in mind, this is my opinion. If you disagree with me, fine, good for you. But anytime I've mixed two speakers together, it's a mess. All right, and I'm going to tell you something. I know these things for a fact. Okay. If you buy a certain particular speaker that's made not in China but in the Celestian factory, let's say, and you're getting a lot of them like I am, and every single one of those, before it's broken in and after it's broken in, has a different sound. And it's amazing to me because it's just a cone, a coil, and a magnet, and a frame. Okay, it's not like an amp that has a million parts.
So you'd think there'd be less...
You'd think there'd be less variation.
You're right.
Okay, but there's not. Okay, and so here's a great subject right here, but don't forget what we were talking about before because I'm going to tie it back in. All right, 112 versus 212 versus 412. Okay, I'm going to stay with 12-inch speakers because generally guitar players have always felt through the years that a 12 is the best speaker to play guitar through, and I feel that way too. But
it doesn't make your speaker cabs too big.
Right. Well, 15s are more for bass. But so anyway. The point I'm trying to make is if you put these speakers in a single 12 that's designed exactly like the one for the 212, prorated for the size, okay, it's a wonderful sound. It's very direct. I mean, and it's the whole thing about not mixing speakers because when you grab a note under your fingers, if two speakers are trying to do two different things, that's not a feel play. I mean, you can't play by feel like that. I don't care who you are, it won't work, okay? It's like they're battling with each other, the frequencies of each different speaker, and no two work as good as two of the same speakers. Okay, so the 112 doesn't even have two of the same speakers, which I just told you sound different. I guarantee you
but they sound pretty similar.
Very similar and do the same thing,
and they're
have a slightly different tone.
Electronically more similar.
Now, when you put the reason why people have always migrated to 212 cabs, you wonder why? You want to know really why, without even knowing it, that people like them better? Because generally if they just plug into one they can bond with it better, is because, like I said, two of those same speakers, okay, having a slightly different frequency response, but not a lot of difference, just a slight bit of difference, creates a more I can't think of the word I'm looking for complex, a more complex tone comes out of that cabinet. You go back to that 112, right? Some of the complexity drops away, but then you pick up this directness that's really nice. Okay, so both of those are nice. Now when you go to 412s, in this discussion, not like, well, yeah, obviously it's louder, so on and so forth, but I'm talking about just the complex issue of how many speakers are in there. When you go to 412s, it's 4 times. Okay, you got 4 speakers that all sound slightly different. So you're going to have amazing complexity, all right, in a 412. Now, if you can be that loud, yeah, and sometimes that's too complex for a lot of people because now you can have a bad sounding speaker in there where it's less of a chance of having that in a 212, and if you have it in a 212, it's real obvious and you don't play the cabinet. That's why people migrate to 212s where all the old Marshall 412s, like some sound like crap and some sound really good and some sound just okay, and that's a reason why people migrate.
Is that why you don't sell 412s?
No, I love 412s. I think they're a wonderful thing. But I'm just saying in industry,
you don't offer them
there's
for
more
sale.
of a chance to have a bad speaker in a 412. That's why people, so generally will tell you through the
They
years.
can bond with the 212
Yeah,
better than
212s are like a very established thing, and I'm giving you some little reasons why. Knowing
so a
it
nice
because,
size you can actually carry
right,
one.
because I'm listening to all these speakers and taking them apart. Like I usually don't recone these old vintage speakers because you can't get the parts. I take them apart and fix what's wrong with them and put them back together. You know, so I know all the stuff that's in a speaker and why it's doing what it's doing. So just a little bit more of my philosophy on that. The wood is thicker on a 412. The back is thicker. So these
And they weigh
all,
a ton.
Well, yeah, but these are all important things. That's why my little 212s are heavy. They're small. I don't like. I think most cabinets, most 212s are too big that I see. They're physically too big for 212s. They don't sound right. They need to be a lot smaller. And you can see that the size of mine are a lot smaller, but I use the thicker wood. So, that
You like the resonance of the thicker wood?
yeah. So that's just just some of my philosophies there. But that whole thing about how many speakers. So now if you put a ceramic and an Alnico in, it's just total garbage. It's just a total mess. Okay. You put two different Alnicos.
Shall we pause this?
Or two different. No, because you won't be able to turn it back
Yeah,
on.
I can.
Just let the phone ring.
Okay. I'll just let it ring.
So you have two different types of ceramics in there. You'll have the same problem because they're just too different from each other. When you grab a note, you hold a note, and you're finding all those little nuances and frequencies. If this speaker's trying to do one thing and this speaker's trying to do another thing, I don't know how anybody can play through that.
Okay. Say then you said I want to use 4 speakers, so I'm going to put 2 Alnicos in one, and then I'm going to put 2 ceramics in the other. And within each speaker cabinet, you're going to have the exact same speaker. What about playing at the same time through both of those cabinets?
Very good point. Okay, and I've done that a lot, and it works, but only if there's 2 heads. Okay. Because when you grab that note, you pull that note in, and those speakers are bouncing off that output transformer. They have a total interaction with the output transformer. If you have 2 different speakers trying to interact with the frequency of that output transformer, you have a mess. Okay.
So it's still this. Is it the same mess or is it a little better?
No. Listen to me. If it's 2 separate amps and this amp is on Alnico, let's go real different. This amp is on a pair of Alnicos, okay, and this amp is on a pair of ceramics, and this is the guitar and this is your finger and this is the note.
And you've got one chord going
into
both amps.
Nuance. It's a very complex way to play, but it works. Okay, you can still control it because what's going on in that amp is synonymously hooking up with that pair of ceramics. And at the same time, that note is feeding through this amp, and that amp is working against that pair of Alnicos. You have a very complex sound. Some might not like that. I don't prefer it, but it works. It does work. But if you put the 2 different speakers off the same output transformer, I just don't understand it. I don't get that. And I think what it happens from is people can't find a good sounding speaker, so they start just throwing the kitchen sink at it. Well, let me start mixing this with this or whatever.
So if somebody was going to try and do that, say with a pair of 10-ins, say they bought 2 10-ins and they bought one of your cabs, but they really love Alnicos, and so they've already got a 2x12 Alnico.
Well, Alnicos sound fine for these.
Would they need to use 2 gain masters with it? They're going to do that setup, or would they just use one?
Whatever
they could do either one. Okay,
yeah, but let's keep this to speakers.
Okay, now breaking
wait.
in. Oh,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So breaking in the speakers. When I know that you seem to have an extremely strong feeling about that when you get the speakers in first, that they don't sound as good as you want, and you do certain things to them, and
yes.
and also the cables and the wires and all that, they have to be broken in.
Let's tie this into the last conversation of throwing the kitchen sink at it, like starting to mix speakers because you can't get a good sound. What's going on there most of the time is you haven't got the speaker broken in. Okay. So, what was one of your other questions? How long?
How long does it take to break them in?
A long, long time. If you put a new speaker, I think speakers are built wrong, myself. Okay. I think the spider's way too tight for the function of the speaker with a guitar amp.
What?
The spider. It's you don't know what it is. It's a thing that forms the cone down over the tube. Okay. And it's just way too tight. I mean, way too tight. That speaker, in order to break that part in, just playing the guitar at the levels you're going to play the guitar at, you're never going to hear that speaker. You're going to sell that speaker on your forum somewhere or on eBay before you've ever heard it. And I'm telling you this for a fact. I know this. Okay, 90% of all those speakers for sale, oh, I didn't like it. Well, you didn't break it in. Okay, and you're not going to break it in playing guitar. There was a thing even on Celestian's website I read a few years ago when their Heritage 30s first came out, and people were saying, "Man, these sound terrible. I have original ones." Well, they don't sound like the original ones. I guarantee you. I've had boxes full of them. I was putting them in cabs too, and I have real ones, and I have spares for all these real ones. I have like 4 spares for each
So many
speaker in here.
speakers.
Okay, so and I've heard them all. Just like I listen to every tube, I listen to every speaker. They don't sound anything like them because they don't have the long fiber paper, and that paper isn't made in the world anymore anywhere, right? But you haven't even heard that speaker. And it was on their website. They actually answered a question of how long it takes to break in that Heritage 30. And I don't remember what the exact answer was, but it was something like so many months of loud volume gigging 5 times a week. Really?
So go on
Are you
vacation
going to
for
put
a
up
week.
with a shitty sounding speaker for 5 months at that volume? Well, so what does that mean? That means I'm not kidding you. I'm telling you, you've never heard that speaker. You've got to break them in. Okay?
So go for a week vacation and put ZZ Top on repeat and just play your speaker.
There you go. That'll do it.
Annoy all your
Heavy
neighbors.
bass, or buy a, if you have a freezer that's not on or something, and you put them in, because freezers are pretty soundproof. You can put them in there, and then hook a CD player up to it on repeat, over and over again. Because guitar ain't gonna do it.
So you're saying vibrate the heck out of them.
You need boom, boom, boom. You need bass. You got to move that speaker, okay, so that when you play the lightest,
To soften it up
sensitive
so it's
note,
not so brittle
that
and-
speaker's already moving. If it's just sitting there when you're playing light and you have to hit hard to make it move, then you can have the most dynamic amp in the world. But
Is that why the blinds flop around
yeah?
when
But
you're
if
playing?
that speaker doesn't start moving immediately, then that whole low level to high level touch sensitivity thing
It's
is
all
gone.
lost.
Plus the sound of the speaker changes. And I'll tell you something else. The speaker breaks in another way without even moving it, okay? Just being on, it builds up a field around it. And that, I know that for a fact because I've done those tests. I can take a cabinet and not break them in prior and play it and go, not for me. And then just leave that one on playing secondary while I'm playing through one that sounds good, and 3 days later that cabinet will sound better. It's still not broken in, but it will actually sound better. And when I sell a cab, it's broke in, but it's not completely broken. I can't put that much time. I can't put months and months into a cab.
So what would you, if you were going to try to make an equivalency
So
of what
when
you've
people
done?
get them and they say, "Man, they sound great," then they call me 2 weeks later and go, "Is it my imagination? I mean, this cabinet keeps getting better and better every day, but I'm not playing loud, so I can't be breaking it in more." And I go, "You are breaking it in more because I've already done the heavy work." So just the field developing around that speaker. I know it's voodoo, and I can't explain to you exactly in electrical terms, but it does happen, and they do continue to
Probably
break
the
in.
magnet's just been broken in,
But
right?
the magnet starts breaking in and
Because
getting more
because
line, gets
if
more line.
the longer you have the field built up around it, the more the magnet aligns.
Yeah. So that that does happen, but you will never hear that speaker you bought unless you break it in, like forcefully. A bass guitar is a good way. If you don't want to hook a CD up to it and you play bass, then start playing bass through it, because just plugging a guitar into it and playing at the volumes you're allowed to play at is you have a slim to none chance of breaking that in before you can't stand that speaker and you wind up selling it.
So that's why you break them in like you do.
Yeah, right.
And people often comment that the blinds are moving in the room, and I love to watch them. It's fun because I can see the correlation between what you're playing and the flapping.
Well, my
of the
amps
blinds.
move a lot of air. They move a lot of air. They're massive sounding.
Is that because they're broken in, or is that because something else?
Well, no. I mean yeah, I don't like any speaker that's not broken in, but it's just something else. It's that the amps have a massive frequency response, and the first thing people say when they play through them is the force they feel, you know, when they turn them up. And even when they're ultra low, it's not loud, but you feel the power in that amp, even playing, you know, where it's not audibly loud and someone's sleeping over there, you know. So they're just very thick sounding amps, and when you do turn them up a little bit, they will rattle everything in this room.
More than that.
Yeah, and they
They
will
buzz certain things.
and they will move the blinds, you know. So
They
a lot
dance.
of times when you see those blinds moving like crazy, and people go, "Man, he's loud." I'm really not that loud.
Well, they
You know.
dance more when it's loud,
But you know, it's when it's turned up a bit. But
and certain notes make it
yeah,
go
it's
more
not
too.
as loud as you would think it is to move those blinds, you know. And that's what moves your soul when you play them, is that big sound, you know.
Okay, so is there anything else about speaker cabinets that we didn't cover? I made a little list, and I think we've covered all of them.
Yeah, I think we covered the difference of open back and closed back. It's a totally different feel and a totally different sound. And
What's the
it-
difference
and it
between
will- and it-
Alnico and ceramic?
Right, and it will usually determine what speaker you decide to put in. For a full, complete design, like I said, you're probably going to wind up with ceramic enclosed and Alnico and open, because if you're respecting all
And
the design,
Alnico in combos.
well, you're stuck with Alnico and combos because there's no back on it.
Is that what you put in your combo?
Yeah, and there's no back.
There's Alnicos in it.
Well, in those, I don't even remember. I built those so long ago. I think no. Those.
Didn't you
used to-
somehow manage to keep
Yeah.
the top open for the amp and the bottom closed for the speaker or something? You
Yeah,
custom designed it.
I don't sell those anymore. That was a very limited run.
Right.
You know, people got their hands on some of those and they love them. You know.
Yeah. And now they want to buy the last two that you have left.
Yeah, I'm keeping those two. They're not for sale.
They're in the museum.
I'm keeping those two for myself.
Okay, so this video went a little longer than I thought, so we'll do the Joe Strummer story later. Say goodbye. If we're done with
The Joe Strummer story.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love that story.
All right. Well, that'll be in another video.
Okay.
Peace out.